This is All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Mariner. I'm the founder of Breathing Spaces. I'm here today with my co-host, Cindy Gum,
Hello.
and we are very happy to have with us today a new guest for us, Ginnie Schmidt. Ginnie, we are so grateful that you've taken the time to be here with us today. And
Thank you for having
Cindy,
me.
yeah, absolutely. And Cindy, I'm going to give this over to you. I'm going to turn this over to you so you can do a proper introduction of Ginnie.
Well, okay. Today we're talking to somebody who caregiving story spans more than 3 decades, a long time. And I believe it's a story of love and of endurance. Ginnie and I met some years ago through a mutual friend, and I thank her for adding one of her story to my book on resilient caregiving. And she and her husband have been caring for their son, James, since the day he was born with global developmental delay. I hope it said that right.
Correct.
Good. And over the years, they've learned what it really does mean to live a caregiving life, not as a single chapter. It's a lifelong journey. Ginnie's story has reminded me that caregiving is not just about tending to someone else's needs. It's also about learning how to care for ourselves in the process, how to build a village, and how to manage a caregiving situation that most caregivers are not in. Ginnie, I really sincerely thank you for being here to share your story. To me, you're an inspiration of all things caregiving, and I know that we'll learn a lot from your experience. So maybe we can just begin our chat here by inviting you to share your story with us.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Boy, in your introduction, it reminded me that apparently I am a full-time caregiver in a long-term situation, and I don't think of myself as that. I might start with our family history a little bit because I'm sure other people this will resonate with them. James is the youngest of three kids. We have two older typical children. James is a 31-year-old special needs young man. And you were exactly right. He was initially diagnosed in 1994 at 6 months old as globally developmentally delayed. And then he was secondarily diagnosed at age 12 as severely autistic. So, from our experience, that's when the autism umbrella really widened, so to speak. And it was helpful for sure to have a diagnosis for services, et cetera. Um, James, he has a chromosomal abnormality, so he doesn't fit into a syndrome. So we call him one of a kind. But he is similar to a person that might have Down syndrome. So that gives you some kind of, reference, I guess, so to speak. Um, we always say James is a lot of work. Especially when he was younger, he wasn't a good sleeper. He is very joyful, and we're very fortunate he doesn't have a lot of behaviors. But we always say he's the best thing we ever did for our older two kids, and particularly for us and everybody we know. You also made comment about the village, and that's something that we have worked really hard on his whole life to just expand our village beyond our immediate family, beyond our older two kids, because we needed help. We needed babysitters. From our parents to our siblings to our kids to their friends to then we worked our way down the ladder. Then it was nieces and nephews, and then, their friends, people that could resonate with James and that he was comfortable with. But it was just expanding that village and hiring people as well, of course.
Hey, Ginnie, wasn't there a story related to this? I remember in talking to you about your story for the book. There was a turning point, wasn't there, that you realized that you needed a village, that you went somewhere and saw something.
Yeah, it's a great part of the story. It was
Yeah.
when he was a little older. There was kind of two turning points. There was one for me, and I'll never forget. I was sitting in the backyard. James was in the pool. We spent a lot of time in the pool in Arizona. And I was kind of having a melancholy, feel sorry for myself day and thought, I cannot do this my entire life. I just can't. So for me, that began the 12-year research project. And I was trying to determine what's the next step? What's a forever home for James? What's that model look like? So I did really start to research, and it was kind of stops and starts as a lot of projects go. I'd get really involved in it, and then I'd back off depending on just busy life, busy work, what have you. And I was researching what was available in Arizona, and we now in 2025 have a lot of options. But at the time, there's kind of three tiers, and what tier might James fall into? So I was really researching the ADH model, the adult developmental home model in Arizona, where it's more of a family caregiving situation where your son or daughter could live. And I think what you might be referring to was my husband's aha moment because we were not really on the same page. I was ready to kind of move forward in this, and my husband, who's a great guy, was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want James to live away from us." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, yes, he's got to." We went to an informational evening in 2018, I believe, and it was a builder. They were building a development for not just only disabled people, but kind of a forever home development that would be welcoming and comfortable. And we had a couple of friends or families that we knew that were buying homes in development. That wasn't a possibility for us at the time, but we thought, well, let's go, let's check this out. So we did go. There were only a couple of kids. I say that like James, we brought James, but there were a lot of adults, parents that were caregiving. And we walked in, and at the time we were both 55 years old. And when we walked in and surveyed the room and sat down, we realized we were the youngest parents in the room. And we sat with a couple that were in their 80s, and they shared their story that they had a son in his 60s, and they were trying to figure out what their next step looked like. And my husband, after we left, said, "Oh, I don't want to do that." So that kind of catapulted us even more so because then we really were on the same page.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That so I remember that because it was made such an impact, and most caregivers don't face those kinds of dilemmas
Mhm.
in their caregiving journey.
It hurt our hearts because to think of being, for us at that time, 30 years down the road, being thinking about this, I thought, no, we've already done this almost 30 years. So what happened with that was we did within 2 years, and we had a caregiver in our life, Bradley, and he's still our caregiver, and that's who James lives with today. And the timing just has to be right at all. The person has to be correct and the timing. And we ended up, the two of them, Bradley and James, moved in together toward the end of 2020, which of course was a whole nother situation. And we assisted with finding the rental property where they lived, and they weren't too terribly far from us. And it was so interesting, and it still continues to be. They've now moved closer to us in another rental property, which is great. And Bradley has since gotten married. There are children in the situation, and James is there. That is James's house, obviously their house as well. But he comes back and forth. Obviously, we have him. I always say we have him when we want him,
Mhm.
and it's not exactly perfect, but boy, it's pretty close. And I wish we could share our story, and I hope this resonates with some people because it's such a win-win-win. And of course, if you find those people that have that heart, because caregiving is not for everybody,
No.
just like being a teacher is not for everybody. And Tim and I, my husband, we always try to say no judging. Like when we talk about caring for parents, and there may be a sibling that just doesn't want to participate, and we've done that as well with our parents and there's no judging. That's fine. Those of us that it works for will take care of it. But it's I think tough to find that caregiver for your child. And that's what I hear from other families. I was with there was a party at our son's home because one of his caregivers got her master's degree and Bradley's wife, which is super exciting. So, of course, we went and participated, and I met a couple and they're friends of theirs. And such an interesting story. They have inherited the care of a sibling. So
Mhm.
this couple's in their 50s, they have adult children, and now his parents have passed, so now they have a sibling that's in his 40s that they're caring for.
Yes.
And they said that our caregivers have been great resources for them, which
Mhm.
is awesome because then you're passing it along. But they did say, I wanted to meet the wife and got to talk with her a few minutes, and she said, we've got to find our Bradley. And I said, I
Wow.
know. And I wish more people could find that or more people were interested in fulfilling that role.
Oh, that would be a good title for a book.
Oh
I
my
wish
gosh,
we could
yes.
find our, because
I thought of that too.
I
Yeah,
was thinking as you were talking, so much about what's a real niche in a situational, for caregivers. And and I just you've learned so much, far more than we can cover, in this episode.
sure.
But we'll noodle on this together because I would love to see that information have a broader reach. And I guess right now I'd love to invite anyone that's interested in learning more about Ginny's story and how she managed to create this village and what she learned to contact us here at Breathing Spaces. And
Mhm.
would you be available if someone reached out to us, Ginny?
Of
To
course.
just share an email chat, or because this is it's very niche, but boy, when you're in this one, you need that help, and you've learned so much that could really help someone else.
Well, and it's so true. And I think sometimes I just talked with a woman who has a 6-year-old. She's a new acquaintance and she has a 6-year-old autistic son. And she was super reticent because we just met each other. So she was reticent, I think, to share much information, but I shared with her a little bit about my situation. So I said, I've been doing this for a few decades. So if you ever have any questions, reach out. But she made the great comment, and I've said this a million times, you don't even know the questions to ask.
Yes.
You just don't. And
No.
then something comes up and you're like, oh, well, gosh, I wish I had known to ask that question or what have you. So there's those that really experience, or, if you're in the governmental system, you have a great DDD case manager or something, that's great. But we don't always have that. Uh,
Mhm.
I was thinking too, when I started this research, my 12-year research project, I reached out to friends, girlfriends that I knew that had special needs kids. We had met through school, most of us, and trying to find what the models look like. And I'll never forget, there was a really lovely woman. She and two other families, they had met at one of Scottsdale's high schools. The kids were in class together, and they ended up putting together their own group home, obviously through an agency, et cetera. But
Mhm.
I was so curious about that because I thought, wouldn't that be great? You're with other families and you become this extended family group. Then the siblings might get to know each other. So that was initially where the path I was going. And we went to visit this group home. Nobody was there at the time. Everybody was at, their day programs or school or what have you. But it was so great to hear about how the kids interacted, how the families interacted, and how the caregivers, they were through an agency, but they became like extended family. So
Right.
that was initially where I was going. I loved that model. But I wasn't able to rally my friends to be ready to move their children out of their family homes. And
Right.
we were ready. I was much closer to being ready. So that's how then it became the ADH. It's like, well, we'll do it ourselves. And by having Bradley in our lives already, and I remember when he had said his family situation changed, he said, I think I'm ready to move in with James. And that was okay. Let's go.
Beautiful.
People can learn so much. I mean, what you've been through and what you've created is just tremendous. And you truly don't know those questions in any caregiving role.
Right.
you're kind of afraid to speak up, you're afraid to ask that question, people might look at me funny. Everything goes along with that. So I honor you for your
Oh, thank you.
journey and what you've done. You've reached out and you've learned, and being willing to be there for other people is just, it's a gift. It's a true gift.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. That's super generous. And we're so blessed with James being in our lives. We
Absolutely.
really are. It's made all of us better people, so empathetic. And I think about just when we're out in the community and working and you come across people that you're not sure quite what's going on with them. It could be an elderly person with dementia. It could be a special needs person, even if, they look perfectly normal. James has some dysmorphic features. So when people look at him, which is also something I always thought we were kind of lucky for, because if you look at James closely, oh, there's something, going on with him. So people give him a benefit of the doubt, which growing up was a blessing. Whereas I have friends that have very typical looking children, but they have other deep-seated issues. So they expect those little, kids at 8 years old to act like a typical 8-year-old, but they aren't. So that was one thing I remember when James was young. I thought, oh, I'm kind of glad people kind of know on the outset. The other thing, though, is and we've talked about like what can you do to help yourself or your family, because you do get really in the weeds, even if you're, whether you're caregiving for a parent, which, or a spouse, which we've all had experiences with. And I've always said, my husband and I have laughed, it's you've got to keep your sense of humor, because if you're not laughing, you're crying. We've talked about that. And my husband this morning, when I was telling him I was meeting with you ladies, he said, remember your trifecta. And I've forgotten about that because it's been a few years, but I was helping to caregive for my father back in 21 through 2023. He had moved to town and he had on dementia. And yet we still had James back and forth. He was in his home, but I had him now and again. And then I was watching my 1-year-old granddaughter. So I would get the three of them because I thought, well, Wednesday afternoon, that's it. We might as well go see my dad, and I'll have James and I'll have the youngest, 1-year-old. And that was so much fun because you're caregiving for everybody. So why not? But it was so fun to have them all interact with each other as well. So those are great memories. Great
Oh
memories.
my God, a trifecta.
That is
There
a
you go.
trifecta.
Yeah, you did it. Wow.
My goodness.
It was
Wow.
fun. It was fun.
Beautiful. Well, just to wrap up, I have just one curiosity. We could talk forever, really.
Sure.
There's so much to your story, but I'm aware that there's also, something related to what I call legacy and letting go. And as you and your husband, have James's long-term future here, how do you balance all of this, and how do you plan for his long-term future? Is there anything you've learned, or maybe that you're just in the process of learning about this as you age as well?
No, great question. It starts earlier. And I remember when James was turning 18, which now he's 31, it's been a long time, is make sure your wills and or special needs trust, which was a road we were unfamiliar with. We didn't know what that was. You need to get those in place.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, what was so important to us was to find this model, whatever that looks like. Find the model that for their forever home, what that might look like. Because if you don't find the model, and it's the same thing with our parents or siblings, if you don't find the model, somebody else is going to be forced to do it. And I was driven because I didn't want my older children to have to take up this mantle without us really putting something in place.
Mhm.
So whether it lasts, this specific caregiver, the specific home they're in,
Right.
whether that lasts or not, at least the model's in place. If that makes sense, we've kind of proven that this
Yeah.
works. At least
Yeah.
it works for James, and that's what's important.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we kind of go day to day. We embrace the present. We talked about that. Um, it's still a juggling act. We live by a calendar. We change the calendar. Our caregivers need to change the calendar. But going to this graduation party, on Saturday night, which was for our caregiver family and her extended family, her parents' friends. I can't believe how much bigger the village has become.
Mm,
And I do wish we could share more about this kind of model. And I understand every state is different.
Mhm.
It has different things. But again, embracing all these other people that could come in your life because you just never know. Like meeting you ladies, who
mm,
knew? I mean, we met a couple of years ago, and then we get here. So it's just embracing those avenues that come to you and keep asking questions. Keep asking questions.
absolutely.
Wow. Well, you've certainly created a structure within which you can be creative and fluid. That's one of my goals in life, to be
Thank
able to
you.
do that. And you've certainly exemplified that. And I thank you so much for sharing your story here today.
Of course.
So over to you, Cindy.
Yes, Jenny, thank you for being part of our episodes here. We look forward to the possibility of having you back again. And again, if any of you are out there and have questions, we'd be happy to put you in touch with Jenny. That's very gracious of you to offer that for folks.
Absolutely. I love your platform. You've done amazing things. I've watched a lot of your podcasts. So thank you for what you're doing. And one last thing, if I may, the whole caregiving journey, there's so many, as you know, so many aspects to it. And I only see it growing
Mm,
because as the baby boomers, as
Yep.
I mean, it's just going to grow in so many ways. And the more people you can touch, the better. So thank you for what you do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Jenny.
watching us and joining us here today as well. We look forward to seeing you again on another episode of All Things Caregiving.
Thank you.
This has been All Things Caregiving from Breathing Spaces.